this video, we are going to introduce functions using two variables. A function is a special type of equation which relates two variables to one another. One variable is dependent on the other independent variable for its value. Which variable is dependent and independent is a matter of convention, but typically y is used for the dependent variable and x is used for the independent one. You can also think of dependent and independent variables as inputs versus outputs. What do I put into the equation, x, and what do I get out of the equation, y? The dependent variable will be isolated on one side of the equation by itself. An equation must satisfy a few rules in order to be considered a function. There can only be one value of the dependent variable for each value of the independent variable. As we're dealing with linear graphs specifically, we shouldn't worry about this rule called the vertical line test just yet. What is the relationship between x and y in this chart? We can see that x is going from 0 to 1, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and 3 to 4, increasing by 1 each time. How about for y? Well, we don't know the value of y when x is equal to 0, so we start from 3.5 to 5. 5 minus 3.5 is plus 1.5. 6.5 minus 5 is plus 1.5. And 8 minus 6.5 is plus 1.5. If this pattern holds, we can assume that y increases by 1.5 for each x increase by 1. Going backwards to find when x is equal to 0 what y is equal to, we take the inverse operation of plus 1.5, which is minus 1.5, and we see that 3.5 minus 1.5 is equal to 2. And so the equation for this is y, the dependent variable on its own on the left, is equal to 1.5x plus 2. This equation is in the form called the slope-intercept form. This 1.5 is called the slope of the graph, and this 2 is called the y-intercept. We will define and show what that means later. For this next chart, we again don't have a value of y at x is equal to 0, so we'll apply a similar tactic. X is increasing by 1 each step. Starting from x equals 1, y is increasing from negative 160 to 80, which is a step change of positive 80, minus 160 plus 80 is equal to minus 80. From minus 80 to 0, minus 80 plus 80 is equal to 0. And from 0 to 80, 0 plus 80 is equal to 80. To find what's missing, we apply the same idea of the inverse operation. Minus 160 minus 80 is minus 240. So the equation will be y is equal to 80x minus 240. Where does this 80 come from? Well, as we saw before, the 80 is the change in y. Before it was 1.5 in the previous problem. Here it's 80. Will it always be the exact number in the change of y that we see from this? No. It's actually defined as the change in y over the change in x. In this case, the delta means change, which is this set of numbers that I've written outside the graph. So in this case, we have 80 on one side, and because it's 1 on this side, it reduces to 80. This minus 240, called the y-intercept, is where the graph intercepts the y-axis, which happens when x is equal to 0. So you see that when x is equal to 0, y is equal to minus 240, and that comes down here in the final answer. Finally, let us demonstrate the power of the slope-intercept form by finding the equation for this graph. The slope is the change in the value of y over the change in the value of x. The change in x between each point on this graph is 1. And so we know that delta x, the triangle is called delta, is going to be 1. Going from x is equal to 0 to x is equal to 1, y changes from positive 2 to 0, which is a change of negative 2. And so we know that the slope will be negative 2. Putting that in, we have y is equal to negative 2 x plus some c, which is a placeholder for the y-intercept. Well, looking at the graph, the vertical line here is the y-axis, and the y-intercept is where the line given intercepts the y-axis. And so here at x equals 0, y equals 2, this 2 is going to be our y-intercept, and so this c will be 2. We can double check. If x is equal to 0, y is equal to minus 2 times 0, which is 0, plus 2. So y, when x is equal to 0, is equal to 2. When x is equal to 1, minus 2 times 1 is minus 2. Minus 2 plus 2 is 0. When x is equal to 2, we have minus 2 times 2, which is minus 4, plus 2, which is minus 2. And we can see here that at 0, we have y is equal to 2. At 1, y is equal to 0. And at 2, y is equal to minus 2.